In this video, we're going to be talking about editing a neon sign layout. And one of the things I really wanted to show you and talk about is this new tool that we created for CorelDRAW. It's called the MyNeonFlex Helper. And it's really a very useful tool. And honestly, in terms of production, I really don't know how you would go about creating a neon sign. Um, in mass quantities without some type of solution similar to what I'm about to show you. So we're going to talk about the problem and then we're going to talk about the solution. Let's go ahead and go into normal mode here for a moment because I want to show you and talk to you about something. So when you're out looking for NeonFlex, and what we're going to be talking about is the quote-unquote standard NeonFlex. So NeonFlex kind of comes two separate ways. So you have one where the LED strip is encased in silicone, and then you also have a two-part NeonFlex where the LED strip is separate from the silicone. Now, I will say this about each variation has its pluses and minuses. So for the two-part LED strip, it really requires a channel that you would set your strip into, and then the diffuser, the silicone diffuser, would sit on top. It would kind of like go into that channel, snap into that channel, and uh, that's how you would make that type of sign. Whereas with this type of LED neon flex, you don't necessarily have to have a channel. You could have a channel, but you don't have to. You could just glue it right on top of a flat surface. In fact, if you look online and how to build a neon flex sign, more often than not, they're going to show you this style neon flex where that you just glue it right on top of whatever substrate or backer board. They're not actually routing a channel because most of us don't have CNC machines and things like that. Now, I do have a CNC machine, so I could definitely use the two-part Neon Flex. But then the other consideration, of course, is cost. So the two-part Neon Flex is definitely more costly than the standard one-part Neon Flex. In fact, the two-part Neon Flex is almost double uh, what a standard LED neon flex strip costs. So then the next consideration when we're talking about neon flex is how far apart are we able to cut it? So you see these little black marks here on this neon flex rope. One of their selling points is they're saying that you can cut it every 1 centimeter. And this is actually quite useful, especially if we're doing a lot of detailed signs. So 1 centimeter, just for reference, 1 centimeter is roughly, it's not quite, but it's roughly 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so if you had a piece of neon flex that was 3/8 of an inch, it would light up. Now, here's the catch. If we cut this in between these two, there's an LED light right there. So if we go and whack it in two, then we're going to whack our LED light right in half. So from that black line to where we cut it, that is going to not show, that's going to go dark. So we have to cut it on those black lines so that our entire strip stays lit. Okay, so that's step one. Now, you might think to yourself, well, then of course I only want to use LED strips that are cuttable by every 1 centimeter. And no, that's not necessarily true at all, and that's one of the things that I really want to talk about. It really depends on the actual specific requirement. If your design requires segments that are smaller than an inch, then yes, this would be the preferred LED strip. But now I haven't done tons and tons of research on this, but generically, and it does actually make sense. We have these little copper pads that we solder our wires onto that make it work. So if we had an LED strip with copper pads at every 1 inch, and then we had an LED strip with the copper pads at every 3/8 of an inch, we've got 3 times as many copper pads on that other LED strip where the copper pads are 1 inch apart, right? So, or 3/8 inch apart rather. So logically, the one with that are cuttable every 3/8 of an inch logically would say that would be more expensive because you have more components. But in my case, on the LED strips that I bought just to kind of test with, the one strip that I bought, and I will link to these specific strips in the listing description, I bought 16.4 feet of LED strip, and it came with a power adapter and was $17. Okay. Then I bought this strip, which is also 16.4 feet, but it did not come with a power adapter, but it was $25. So if I were to buy the power adapter on top of the strip, I would definitely be roughly spending twice as much for the LED strip that could cut every 3/8 of an inch versus the LED strip that could cut every 1 inch. So, there is something to consider from that perspective too. So, what I thought I would do is show you a real world example and why it's probably not that big a deal for most of your signs. Now, again, if you're making really detailed signs where your individual segments are going to be less than an inch, well, then you might consider this type of rope. But also, you just have to consider that it's going to literally probably be roughly twice the cost. So, with that all said, let me show you how we're going to go about editing this design. Let's go into wireframe mode here. I just think it's easier to work in wireframe mode. So we are working in CorelDRAW 6, and what we're going to do is we're going to just select this segment and look here what it's telling us here. So on the Design Edit tab, it says the current segment length is 7.48. The required length is 7.41 based on the fact that it requires 19 segments. So we don't, we talked about how if we were to cut in between segments, we could lose a piece of our strip. So we don't want that. So we want to cut right on those black lines. If we go to the Settings tab, we could specify what that setting spacing is. And we specify that in centimeters. And the reason we chose centimeters is because the LED manufacturers, most of them will tell us what the centimeter value is. Now, most of them will also tell you what the inch value is, but the most universal way is to enter this value in centimeters because all the LED manufacturers do give you it in centimeters. Some also give you it in inches, but all give you a centimeter value. So we're going to switch over to 2.5 centimeters because that is the cheaper LED that I'm going to be using for this project. So if I go over to the Design Edit tab now and I click that first strip, you could see that it's currently 7.48 and it needs to be 7.84 and it requires 8 segments. Okay, so what I would do then, because I know this needs to be 7.84, it needs to be a little bit bigger, I just double click on my line and then grab a node and pull it down till I see this number says 7.84. 7.74, there we are, 7.84. Now, when we were moving it, it seemed like we were moving it a massive amount. It's like, oh my God, we just moved it a whole lot. Well, that's because I'm zoomed way in. If we go back out here, you can see it basically doesn't look any different. Let me just pull this away, make a copy of it, and we'll make another copy of it. I want to illustrate a couple of things here. So this is going to be our original. We're going to say that's our original, and this is going to be our modified version. So this horizontal line here, that's another segment, and it's saying it's currently 2.25, but we need it to be 1.96. Okay, so again, we would just double click on it and just pull it across until this is 1.96. Now you can see I went a little crazy because now we're at 1.88. So I need to pull it back across. There we go. That's 2.95. I do try to get it pretty accurate. 9.7, 9.6. Okay. Now we did move it that much. So visually that, that may look like a lot to you, but we had to move it that much to line exactly on the cut line. Okay, so we'll slide that over. All right, now these two basically have to be one of two things. Either they have to be one segment, which is 0.98, or they have to be two segments. Okay, so let's do this. Let's just make these 0.98. Let's take a look at what it looks like at 0.98. And this is a totally a judgment call on your part, how you want it to look. So I think we're going to go with that. And then so once I have this, so that's exactly one segment. Okay, so you can see that was our original, and this is the modified version. Now, if we wanted to, maybe on this one, maybe I would rather this be the 1.96. So let's just pull this over till we get to 1.96 and take a look at it. So that's 9.8, 9.7, there we go, 9.6. So that's what it would look like if we stuck with this side being two segments, this side being one. And I can live with that. We can always, kind of move this up and over something like that. So that could be fine. That'll be fine. So what do we do in this situation? Well, let's look at this A here. And you can see it's currently 6.49 inches. And we need it to be 6.86 inches. So what do? Well, we know that the start and end point, we really wouldn't want to modify. So what we have to do is we have to add a little bit to the A itself. And the easiest way to do that is to just grab it and see, that's going to be a bigger curve. So now we are at 6.63. Now we are at 6.87, so we're a little bit too big. We'll pull that back a little bit, 8.4, somewhere in between, 6.86. So you can see if we look at the difference here, there's not much difference there, but now this will start and stop exactly on those cut lines. Okay? So this piece here is currently 5.31. It needs to be 4.9. So what could we do here? Well, we could chop off top of the A, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and lop off some of this. Okay, so I added a node and then double clicked on the outside node, and you can see now we're at 4.95. Double click on and then double click on the end node. Now we're at 4.89. We need to be 0.9. So we'll just move it up. Now we're at 4.9. Okay, so now I can go ahead and reselect those and just slide that over just that little bit, and you can see that there's hardly any difference between that and that, So there you go. So this piece here is at 3.37. It needs to be 2.94. Well, we can't modify the bottom, so we're going to modify the top. Now, eventually, I am going to code these buttons. So I could just choose the trim top, and it would automatically trim this top down to 2.94. I just haven't got there quite yet. But certain situations we can just take off from the top or the bottom, or we could take off an even amount on both sides. Certain situations we're going to be able to do that. Certain other situations we're not going to be able to do that. Okay, so when that happens, then I'll show you what we're going to do here. So we're going to delete that. So that's so we'll go ahead and delete that. So maybe I'll just come down, make a crazy edit. So you can see we're way short now. So then we could just kind of pull it back up, pull it down a little bit more. Ooh, somewhere in between there. So if it's kind of hard, I just zoom back in. So there you go. Now, if you look here, there's just not that significant difference between that and that, okay? Now, the R here, it is currently 5.8, and it needs to be 5.88. So all we have to do is grab a node here and just adjust it ever so slightly. 8.4, 8.6, there we go. So now you can see we have basically the same shape as we had, but now this is exactly 6 segments long. So we would just keep doing that. So this one here doesn't really need much adjustment. When it's within one decimal position, I probably wouldn't even mess with it because this is 8.81. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could just come up here, adjust it. We adjusted it way too much. But like I said, if in the real world, if it was 0.81 and it needed to be 0.82, I wouldn't actually mess with it at all. It's just not necessary. So for our E here, we are 9.85, 9.8. You know, you could argue that you really don't need to modify this either, even though, you know, it is 5/10 off. But, you know, because it's such an insignificant amount, we'll just nip a little bit off there. I nipped a little bit too much, so we'll add it back in there. There we go. So see what I was talking about? Look at how much difference that is. Hardly anything at all. So so we'll just go ahead and finish this. 5.57, it really should be 5.88. So we could add a little bit to the top of the Y here. Might choose to do that. So I'm going to add a node and just pull that up a little bit. That would be one solution. Or we might do two things. We might, you can see how much we added to the top, but then we might come down here and add a little bit to the bottom. Modify that. So that says 9.2, which is too much. So we'll back it off, 9.1. $5.9. And you know, you move it and this doesn't update. That's because you didn't move it enough for it to update. This is rounding off the actual value. But so if we don't move it a certain amount, that's not going to update when we're moving it that insignificantly. Okay, so there's the Y. And then this piece is going to come down and around and up. So it's 10.9. It needs to be 10.78. So we need it to be smaller. So what we would do is go ahead and just bring this in. Double click on the shape. Bring this in a little bit. So that's 6.4. I brought it in too much. That's 8.3. So we need somewhere in between. That's 8. 7.5. And I just keep zooming in. 7.6, 7.7, 7.8. There we go. And then we have this final segment. It needs to be 1.96 and it's currently 2.26. So I will just come in here, nip that off. Now I nipped way too much and I knew that. But I'm just going to go ahead and stretch it back out. 9.1, 9.7, 9.6. Excellent. So now I know that each and every segment is exactly the proper length so that each segment here will exactly be the exact length, and all the cut lines will be right on those black segments of our LED NeonFlex. Okay, So that is our finished design after we made all the appropriate edits, and that is the original. So you can see it's basically the same sign, except we made the necessary adjustments so that everything is exactly how it should be. Although for some reason I didn't edit this one, and I really should. So that should be 7.84, 77. There we go. So now when I click on these, 7.84, 7.84, that should be 1.96. That's what it is, and that's what it should be. This is one segment, so it's only going to be 0.98 of an inch. See, all these do line up perfectly now. 4.9, 4.9, etc., etc. Okay? So I hope you found that useful and helps you understand how that can benefit. So the one takeaway here is we don't have a lot of fine details in this design. That's takeaway number one. But the big thing is the difference between the 1 centimeter cut and the 2.5 centimeter cut. You've got to consider the price of the MyNeonFlex for that 1 inch centimeter cut, which can be nice and is absolutely necessary when we are doing more highly detailed designs, because our line segments will be less than a single inch. But as long as all of our line segments are longer than an inch, then we're good to go with the other style neon. So, like I said, I hope that was informative for you and give you a little bit a better idea of how you can very easily edit your layouts so you can get exact production requirements. Thanks for watching.